Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and it's day 4 of the Aether Revolt set review, which means we're taking a look at all of the red cards. As a quick note, somebody recommended that I maybe switch up the order next time around. I start with blue or green or etc. Is that a good idea? Do you guys like that? Let me know in the comments below. I know limited resources do that, and that's totally doable. I just always stuck to the Wooburg order because... Wooburg. Anyways, this of course is a limited set review, but we're going to jump right on into the first card now. Aether Chaser is up first, of course, part of the Aether cycle, as we've been seeing, the kind of mediocre Aether cycle. Aether Chaser is 1 and a red for a creature, human, artificer at common. It's a 2/1. It has first strike. When Aether Chaser enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever Aether Chaser attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. This is probably one of my favorites as well, along with the Death Touch one, because this one wants to attack. It's a 2/1 for 2 with first strike. You're going to play this and next turn attack. It's probably the only one of this entire cycle where you're going to almost always just be able to turn this sideways the turn after it comes down, and then you can make yourself a servo. This does get outclassed a little bit quickly once there starts to be X3s on the board, but until then, this is just a solidly aggressive creature. I like it quite a bit. I probably like it just as much as the black one. They're just totally different cards. The black one, of course, is your traditional defensive death touch, hey, you're not going to attack me because your creature's going to die kind of card, and this is the typical red, I'm going to hit you in the face a lot kind of card. I like it quite a bit. It's still not amazing. It's still not a high pick in any way, shape, or form. It's like mid-pack, maybe even high mid-pack as soon as you know that you're red, but it's still just sort of a C+ for me. So Aether Chaser, C+. Chandra's Revolution is up next. Chandra's Revolution is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Chandra's Revolution deals 4 damage to target creature. Tap target land. That land doesn't on-tap during its next controller's next on-tap step. I added an extra next in there. So I guess keywording this ability as freeze would be a little bit tricky because it does rarely show up on red, and Chandra's clearly not freezing something. She's just breaking it. Anyways, this seems fine enough. I really don't care about the land thing. That's not exciting, and it's generally going to be meaningless, and sometimes it'll be like, oh cool, it did something, that's fine. The real story here is that it's 4 damage for 4 mana to a creature, which is totally solid. Sorcery speed certainly hurts this a little bit, so it's not going to be a super high pick, and probably not ever first pickable unless the pack is garbage. But yeah, Chandra's Revolution seems like a solid B- to me. I'll include probably just every copy I have. It kills most things in the format, so B- for Chandra's Revolution. Next up is Destructive Tampering. Destructive Tampering is 2 and a red for a sorcery at common. Choose 1, destroy target artifact, or creatures without flying can't block this turn. So the second half of this card is called Magmatic Chasm most recently, and it costs 1 and a red for that effect. I have a lot of bad stories and experiences with Magmatic Chasm, so much so that some opponents at my local store will randomly ask me in the middle of a match, do any of your creatures fly? Because of course I've died many times to having an awesome board and doing very well, and suddenly being hit in the face for like 12 because none of my creatures can block. Anyways, 3 mana is a little bit much for that. 1 and a red is nice because, you know, aggressive decks that curve out at 3 can easily cast Magmatic Chasm and maybe even cast a Shock along with it. 3 is a little bit more. The destroy target artifact is still mediocre. It's probably, I guess, the best red artifact destruction that red's going to get at common in this format. It's still not great. I still wouldn't main deck it. I still think this is a sideboard only card when you find out that you are kind of getting gummed up in the board and you want to be aggressive. I wouldn't really main deck this outside of being a super hyper aggressive deck where you know you're going to need this to finish off. But yeah, generally I would keep this in the sideboard as a D+. Brawl Gear Smasher is up next. Brawl Gear Smasher is 2 and a red for a creature, human warrior at common. It's a 2/3, and it has an ability, tap, sacrifice an artifact. Brawl Gear Smasher deals 2 damage to each opponent. A 2/3 for 3 is filler, kind of at the C- level, the you'd prefer not to play this kind of level. The ability is nifty, but having to tap this means that you only get to do it once a turn, which isn't very great. If this was sack an artifact, deals 2 damage, it'd be way better. Still, I can see situations where you have your opponent low on life and you tap and sack and deal 2 on their turn, and then on tap and then tap and sack and deal 2 on your turn. You've dealt 4 and maybe killed them. Odds are that's still a pretty narrow situation to happen, and probably too narrow of a reason to play this guy reliably, as it's just totally unimpactful the rest of the game. I'll start pretty low on this at a C- and assume that it's just too inconsistent and narrow to actually work. So C- for Embrawl Gear Smasher. Enraged Giant is up next. Enraged Giant is 5 and a red for a creature giant at uncommon. It's a 4/4. It has Improvise, it has Trample, and it has Haste. I have zero desire to play this for full price. Absolutely not. F at full price. At a 1 mana discount, I'm kind of okay with it. And only at a 2 mana discount do I start to think about this being decent, kind of being a 4/4 for 4 with Trample and Haste. Note as well that I do want those discounts to be on curve. I don't care if I get a 2 mana discount on turn 12. You know, that's probably not going to be that great on turn 12, getting a 4/4 Trample Haste. It'll do something, but it's nowhere near as good as getting a 4/4 Trample Haste on turn 4. The later the game goes, the less impactful this has, unless it's winning you the game that turn, unless it's the creature that gets you through. This is another card that entirely depends on your artifact situation and how reliably you can have artifacts down before this in order to get the discount on curve. And so I think it does range from kind of a low D to a high C, so I'll start this at a C for Enraged Giant. Free Jam Regent is up next. Free Jam Regent is 4 red for a creature dragon at rare. It's a 4/4 with Improvise, it has Flying, and it has double Fire Breathing, so pay 1 and a red to give it +2/+0 until end of turn. Fire Breathing, of course, is a single red for +1/+0. This is a very traditional bomby creature. It's a big flyer that pumps. It fully reminds me of Sheevan Dragon, which of course was one of the most amazing bombs way back in the day, and of course is not that good anymore. Although still pretty good and limited. Anyways, it's pretty expensive pre-improvise, although still is reasonable. I could see this card being printed at rare in some sets for this cost without improvise. Now with Improvise, if you plop this down on turn 4 or turn 5, then it's going to be super bomby. I think you do need to know when to play this and when not to. I think if you are, of course, a traditional aggressive red deck, this is probably just too expensive, unless you are super flush with artifacts. But yeah, I still think this is a solid first pick. I think this is bomby, and in all but the most aggressive of red decks, you're going to be happy playing this at full cost, and you're going to be ecstatic if you do get even a 1, let alone a 2, 3, or 4 mana discount on this. Free Jam Regent I like quite a bit. I'm going to give it a solid A. Up next is Frontline Rebel. Frontline Rebel is 2 and a red for a creature human warrior at common. It's a 3/3. Frontline Rebel attacks each combat if able. This seems like totally fine filler. As I've talked about, we don't always see 3/3s for 3 these days. It passes the vanilla test perfectly. We certainly don't see that at common too often. So getting one with a downside, quote unquote downside, of having to attack is a pretty decent deal. It looks like a downside, but this is a red card. This is an on curve vanilla test passing red card. You are planning to attack with this every single turn anyways, so this isn't even really a downside. Seems like a totally solid C to me, even maybe a C+, although just being a perfect vanilla pass probably keeps it at a C. You'll probably play it most of the time. You'll feel totally fine about it. Don't pick it super highly, more like a mid-pack kind of thing, but you'll probably play it and be totally fine with it all the time. Next up is Gremlin Infestation. Gremlin Infestation is 3 and a red for an enchantment aura at uncommon enchant artifact. At the beginning of your end step, Gremlin Infestation deals 2 damage to enchanted artifact's controller. When enchanted artifact is put into a graveyard, create a 2/2 red gremlin creature token. This could have some serious potential. I'm getting nightmares of Stab Wound. So Stab Wound was a black enchantment in a core set and Return to Ravnica. I think it was in Origins maybe. It was enchanted creature gets -2/-2, and every turn their controller takes 2 damage. This is a little bit more narrow because you have to hit an artifact with it. And as we've talked about, not every deck is always going to have an artifact on the battlefield. Most decks will be playing at least a couple of artifacts, and you probably will have a target here or there. The trick is going to be, is this going to be as effective as Stab Wound? And I'm not sure. The issue, of course, is if you throw this on a servo, they're just going to attack that servo into you, and it becomes a race, or you're going to kill that servo at some point, or they'll shock their own servo and kill it or something like that, and you get a 2/2, and the 2 damage clock goes away. But on the other hand, you put this on a Prophetic Prism. You put this on an artifact that can't really be interacted with all that well, that isn't really meant to be removed from the battlefield, and this is a very quick clock. This is a 10-turn clock from full life, and anything lower, and they're just going to get killed really fast. I don't know. It really depends on the consistency and how many targets this is reliably going to have. And then, of course, if the creature does go away, or if the artifact does go away that it's on, if it's not an artifact creature, you get a 2/2 Gremlin, which, that's fine. Continue doing 2 damage with it. I think this is going to be an absolute beating, and I'm going to start really high on this. Maybe too high, but I'm going to start at a solid B. I will first pick this card to start. I think this is so close to Stab Wound that I cannot underrate this card. So solid B for Gremlin Infestation. Next up, we have Hungry Flames. Hungry Flames is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Hungry Flames deals 3 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Yes, please. This is just solid red instant speed removal. It kills an awful lot of what you want to kill. It can finish off bigger things post-combat. Easily first pickable. You'll play as many of these as you can absolutely get your hands on, because it's Lightning Strike plus 2 damage to the player too. Totally fine. Totally fine. Solid first pick. I'll go with A-. It's obviously not unconditional because it doesn't kill everything, but you're not first picking this in most packs. It's going to have to be a bomby bomb to beat this out, or unconditional removal. So, well, no, I guess it's not unconditional. So let's temper our rating slightly with a B+. B+ for Hungry Flames. Next up, we have the bluest looking art on a red spell ever, Indomitable Creativity. X, red. I almost said blue. Sorcery at Mythic. Destroy X target artifacts and or creatures. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until an artifact or creature card is revealed and exiles that card. Those players put the exiled cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. This is worded weirdly. The cards exile basically because if you're destroying a couple of artifacts of the same player, it would be tricky with the wording to put them on the battlefield from the top of the library, so the exile just fixes all that. Ignore that. Basically, you flip through your deck and put down permanents for as many things that were destroyed. I'm totally out on this. I think it's garbage. It would be cute to cast this for 6 mana or so and turn 3 of your servos into something probably more relevant, perhaps even amazing. It's, maybe removal, but it's that removal that I really don't like, where you remove something of your opponents and hope they don't hit something better. Leave this card to Hearthstone. This is a Hearthstone card. This is random as random gets, and I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Solid F. I'm not touching Indomitable Creativity. Invigorated Rampage is up next. Invigorated Rampage is 1 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Choose 1. Target creature gets +4/+0 and gains trample until end of turn, or 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. This seems ridiculously scary to me. An opponent's attacking me with 2 open mana? I might just be taking 4 extra damage. Even if I block, it's going to trample through. It's still a combat trick, and one that doesn't save your creatures because there's no toughness boost. But boy, +4/+0 and trample for 2 seems really good. I'll play this in every single red deck ever, and I'll take it in sort of the good combat trick area of the pack, which is sort of like high-ish mid-pack pick, kind of where I would take Blossoming Defense. So I'll go with a B- on this. This just seems like an incredibly efficient and powerful combat trick, but it is still just a combat trick. So B- for Invigorated Rampage. Carrie Zevs, Skyship Raider is up next. Carrie is a 1 and a red legendary creature, human pirate at rare. She's a 1/3. She has first strike and menace, which is weird. Whenever Carrie Zevs Skyship Raider attacks, this is what people love. You create a legendary 2/1 red monkey creature token named Ragavan that's tapped and attacking. Exile that token at the end of the combat. So this is a Skyship pirate who has a monkey friend who comes out and attacks. I'm having a tough time figuring this one out. It's technically a 3/4 when it attacks on turn 3, which is super solid, but it's not that. It's a 2/1 that can be chump blocked pretty darn easily after turn 3 by almost anything, and just gets killed by a 3/3. And it's a 1/3 that for some reason has first strike and menace. So as soon as your opponent gets out a pair of bears, she's basically unable to attack. My guess is that this could be fine in a hyper aggro red deck, especially paired with some burn to clear the way. I feel like she really wants some equipment, or some auras or something like that, which then of course opens her up to removal and you getting 2 for 1 if it's an aura, or wasting time if it's an equipment, and there's just not that much good equipment in the format. Speaking of which, there's no equipment, by the way, spoilers, in Aether Revolt at all. But yeah, I don't know. The second your opponent stabilizes, I feel like Carrie's just dead. She's just worthless. So I'm going to start a little bit low on her. I'm going to start at a B-. I don't think she's first pickable a lot of the time. Yeah, you get a monkey with a name, which is pretty darn cool. Token's pretty great. But I'm going to start at a B- on Carrie Zev, Skyship Captain. Or, sorry, Raider. She's not a captain. Yet. Like the rest, Carrie has expertise. Carrie Zev's expertise is 1 red for a sorcery at rare. Gain control of target creature or vehicle until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. Very important to note, it does not turn the vehicle into a creature. You will still have to crew the vehicle. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. I am not really a fan of threat and effects in general, but I do recognize their explosive potential at times. The big issue, of course, for me is that this doesn't turn on the vehicles, so why would you steal a vehicle unless you already have a creature that can crew it? It just doesn't do anything for me. I like my threat and effects to give, +2/+0, or give them trample, or give them some sort of effect or something. Getting a free 2-drop really doesn't feel that exciting to me. The odds of you having a 2-drop late in the game, because of course you should generally be casting your threat and effects late in the game, generally on the last turn of the game. This should be winning you the game, and getting a free 2-drop just doesn't feel like much to me. Maybe you have a shock, and maybe your shock wins you the game. But that being said, why can't you just cast the shock anyways when you're casting a 3-drop spell? This just feels like a really mediocre expertise. I'm going to give it a C-. I don't think I'm going to play it at all, and I will pass it probably just every single time that I see it. Late pick. I'm not a fan of it. C-, Carrie Zev's expertise. Up next is Ravenous Sailback. Ravenous Sailback is a 4 and a red creature lizard at common. It's a 5/4 and that's it. It's a vanilla 5/4 for 5. So one thing that new players initially think is that bigger numbers equal better creatures, but as you gain experience you find that there is a serious amount of diminishing returns as the cost goes up. Yeah, it's big. Yeah, it can kill a lot of things. But you have to get to 5 mana, and you're not necessarily going to get to 5 mana when you want to, or some games ever. This would need trample or something else to be playable outside of sealed, or a desperate sort of I need this creature kind of slot. Ambitious Aetherborn was a 5 mana 5/4 sometimes, and that was sort of a C, maybe even a C+ in Kaladesh, but it was a million times more versatile because it could be a 5/4 when you wanted it to be, or it could be a 4/3 plus a 1/1 when you wanted it to be, or a 4/3 plus an artifact if that was relevant. That is very different from a vanilla 5/4 for 5. This is a C-. Play this in sealed because you need a creature, or in draft because your draft didn't go that great and you desperately need a creature or a 23rd card. So C- for Ravenous Sailback. Lightning Runner is up next. Lightning Runner is 3 red for a creature human warrior at Mythic. She's a 2/2. She has double strike, she has haste, and whenever a Lightning Runner attacks, you get 2 energy. Then you may pay 8 energy. I'm not going to say it 8 times. If you pay, untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. I think this is going to be probably a bit tricky to go off with, to be honest. The trick is you have to attack with this 2/2 that can be killed by any random 3/3. Any random 3/3 trades with this giant mythic 5-drop. Or a shock. A shock kills this 5-drop 2/2 mythic. 8 energy can also be slightly difficult to get in a red energy deck. Green, of course, and blue are typically the best energy producers. Red has a lot of energy production, but it's not quite as good, and I don't think you'll often get up to the 8 energy needed to get your second combat step. Ultimately, I think this card's probably just going to be way too overhyped and way too overrated. I certainly think it's powerful. Even as a 2/2 double strike haste, I think it's fine. Although 5 is a little bit much for that. I certainly think it's powerful. I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm not going to go too down on this, but I am just going to give it a B. I don't think this is going to be as explosive as people really super want it to be. So I'm going to be on Lightning Runner. I will try it for sure. If I see it in a pack, I will of course first pick it because I'm going to want to try to play with it, and it might have some value attached to it. But I do think it's going to be overrated. So B for Lightning Runner. Pias Revolution is up next. We have Chandra's Revolution. We also have Pias Revolution. Pias Revolution is 2 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to your hand unless target opponent has Pias Revolution, deal 3 damage to him or her. This is another fairly nice addition to the red-based Artifacts Matters decks like the Reckless Fireweavers and whatnot. The downside is that this doesn't check tokens, and red artifact decks tend to thrive on their partner colors servo producers in Kaladesh. Of course, we're not going to have as much Kaladesh. We're not going to have as much Fabricate. So we are going to need our artifacts to come from somewhere else. Still, with enough artifact creatures, vehicles, implements, which we'll talk about later, which I don't think are going to be good, puzzle knots, things like that, you could potentially be either drowning in value or lightning bolting your opponent frequently. This is definitely a build around, and I do see some potential for it, but I don't quite think it's going to be reliable enough to really go off with. I'll start at a B-. I see the potential, but it is also a do-nothing enchantment. So maybe I'm optimistic at a B-, but I'll start it at a B- for Pias Revolution. Precise Strike is up next. Precise Strike is a single red mana for an instant at common. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. I have no idea why they made a new card instead of just reprinting Kindled Fury. This is just Kindled Fury. It's exactly the same. It even seems like Kindled Fury, that name would fit in Aether Revolt, but whatever. Anyways, this is a standard red combat trick. It tends to save your creature while killing the blocker or attacker that it's up against, but it's not exciting. It should never be included over more relevant cards. It's kind of a standard C combat trick. You'll take it pretty late, and if you have a spot, you'll put it in. And if you don't, you won't. So solid C for Precise Strike. Quicksmith Rebel is up next. Quicksmith Rebel is 3 and a red for a creature human artificer at rare. He's a 3/2, and he says when Quicksmith Rebel enters the battlefield, target artifact you control gains, quote, tap. This artifact deals 2 damage to target creature or player for as long as you control Quicksmith Rebel. Like Quicksmith Spy, this is overcosted. It's a 3/2 for 4. We want to play 3/2s for 3. However, that's not as overcosted as a 2/3 for 4 as the Quicksmith Spy was. But this effect, strapping a pair of Prodigal Sorcerers onto ideally a non-creature artifact that's going to be a little bit trickier to remove, is going to be a very, very real clock. I will very gladly first pick this card and build around it every single time I see it. I will build into a heavy artifact deck. There's some artifacts that let you on-tap artifacts. This in a blue-red deck with a Janji Sentry to on-tap things. Boy, this could be a really serious clock. I want to strap lasers onto all my artifacts. Quicksmith Rebel, I really like. I'm going to go with a B+ on it. Not any higher because a single shot kills it. You know, a 1-mana common kills this creature, and then your laser is gone. But boy, that power potential, B+ for Quicksmith Rebel. Up next is Ravenous Intruder. Ravenous Intruder is 1 and a red for a creature gremlin at uncommon. It's a 1/2, and it says sack an artifact. Ravenous Intruder gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Older players recognize this as ATOG. This is just ATOG. This is a great, cheap Revolt enabler, because you just sack it. However, I'm not super sold on the creature. I have not actually played a limited format with ATOG in it, but I don't think it was ever very good, potentially because there weren't that many playable artifacts. This set, of course, has tons of playable artifacts or incidental artifact tokens that you'll have that you can sack. However, this still doesn't have trample or flying or menace or any sort of evasion. So you're not gonna, just sack 5 artifacts and get in for a whole bunch most of the time. So I'm still not super sold on Ravenous Intruder. I don't think it's that great. If you can somehow make it fly or make sure that your opponent's board is clear while you have a ton of artifacts, you should just be winning anyways. You shouldn't have to sack all of those artifacts to make this into a big thing. I'm going to start a little bit down on it. I'm going to start at a C-. I don't think it's going to go off the way you want it to. And I just noticed that this gremlin is eating a soul ring, or trying to eat a soul ring. Anyways, C- for Ravenous Intruder. Reckless Racer is up next. Reckless Racer is 2 and a red for a creature human pilot at uncommon. It's a 2/3 with first strike, and whenever Reckless Racer becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. You get to rummage. 2/3 for 3 becomes a little bit better when it gets first strike. Probably climbing its way back to a C from a C-. The ability on this is nice enough, and it can help you keep filling your hand with better cards, throwing away the lands or whatnot that you have in an aggressive red deck that you no longer need, while still getting in for damage. It's not super exciting. It's not a super high pick. It's kind of mid-pack, but I'll probably, I think, always play it when I have it. So I'll go with a solid C+ on it. I think it's fine. It's not exciting in any way, though. Don't waste a real pick on this. C+. Release the Gremlins is up next. Release the Gremlins is an XX red sorcery at rare. Destroy X target artifacts. Create X 2/2 red gremlin creature tokens. Realistically, the artifact destruction portion of this is, in limited, going to be hitting what? 2 artifacts? Maybe. I mean, how many does the average opponent really have on the board at any given time? And then you get what? 2 2/2s for 5 mana? It's fine, I guess, but it's so narrow. As well, note that this is not destroy up to X artifacts. This is destroy X artifacts. If I can jam 9 mana into this, I have to hit 5 artifacts before I get those 5 gremlins. If I can't cast it. You absolutely must destroy those artifacts, yours or your opponent's, in order to get those gremlins. I feel like this is probably, honestly, at its best, just a 2 red, blow up an artifact and get a 2/2 gremlin. Which is fine. You know, that's totally fine. It's still probably sideboard only. Maybe it's high enough to be a main deck as like a C-, maybe like a Fragmentize or something. Yeah, I'm not super sold on Release the Gremlins. I don't think it's that great. I'm going to leave it in the sideboard most of the time. So D+ for Release the Gremlins. Scrapper Champion is up next. Scrapper Champion is 3 and a red for a creature human artificer at uncommon. She's a 2/2. She has double strike. When Scrapper Champion enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever Scrapper Champion attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do put a +1/+1 counter on it, the Thriving Cycle's back. And, yeah, boy, is it back. This attacks as a 3/3 double strike on turn 5. That's disgusting. And if you have more energy after that, we're looking at a 4/4 double strike, a 5/5 double strike. That's insane. Honestly, I'm a little surprised this isn't a rare. This is an easy first pick in a lot of packs. It might even give some removal a run for its money in pick order. This just seems like a solid B+ to me. It's barely missing out on the A range because it is a 2/2. Dies to shock. Dies to removal, etc. It doesn't do anything the turn it comes down, basically, is what's keeping this out of being a super A range. But boy, this card just seems insane. And at uncommon, you're going to have to play against it. So B+ for Scrapper Champion seems super good. Up next is the card that we've talked about a ton because it is going to define the format, and it's going to be the fear of every X2 creature. We have Shock. Shock, if you're unaware, it's an old card. It's been reprinted a bunch. It is a single red mana for an instant at common. Shock deals 2 damage to target creature or player. You can finish off an opponent with this, and that's one of the huge things that makes Shock really good is the versatility. I love Shock. It's no lightning bolt for sure, but it's just so cheap and so versatile. You can easily hold up the mana for this. You can bluff it really well. Using this to finish off an opponent is fantastic. During combat, you can finish off a creature, or early on, just kill off a 2/2. You can kill off some very scary bombs in this format, like the Scrapper Champion, like the Quicksmith Rebel. A single red mana common blows up these terrifying cards. There's so much use to Shock. I will gladly first pick it in a pack that's a little bit weak. Of course, unconditional removal is better. Burn that does more damage is better. Even bombs, especially if they're X3s or higher, are better. But in weak packs, if they exist, and if Kaladesh is any metric to go by, they will exist, I will take this first pick. Still, in packs where there are legitimately better cards, I'm still going to take this in the top, 3, 4, 5 picks of most packs. So Shock, very happy to see it back. Solid B. Real good card. It kills a lot of scary things in this format. Siege Modification is up next. Siege Modification is a 1 red enchantment aura at uncommon. Enchant creature or vehicle. As long as enchanted permanent is a vehicle, it's a creature in addition to its other types. Enchanted creature gets +3/+0 and has first strike. This is a trap, right? I think it's a trap. I mean, the Christmas Land dream is putting this on a vehicle, of course, because then you can attack with that vehicle without crewing it. But at that point, we have a card that we're looking to play on, what, maybe one unique card in our deck or two unique cards that we may just never see. That's a bad card. Looking at this as an aura for our other non-vehicle creatures, we've seen this card before, actually, called Lightning Talons and Shards of Alara, although it was slightly easier to cast because it was 2 in a red. Not getting a toughness booster makes this really risky, though. Putting this on an X2 means that you get 2 for 1 because of shock. There's a lot of red kill spells, there's a lot of black kill spells, there's a lot of ways that you're going to get 2 for 1 with this. I'm pretty sure this is a trap. I'm pretty sure it's a trap. Super hyper-aggressive decks won't care, just like they didn't care and played Giant Spectacle, which I did with them and had some use to that. But be careful with this. I think it's ultimately a trap. I'm going to lose when a 7-11 vehicle that we'll talk about in a few days gets this put on, becomes a 10-11 first strike vehicle on turn 3, but it's still not going to be right to play it. I think this is a total trap. I'm at a C- on it. Not going any lower because I do recognize that a hyper-aggressive deck simply won't care that they have this and get 2 for 1 sometimes because they'll win the rest of the time. So C- for Siege Modification. Sweatworks Brawler is our second last red card. For some reason, red has one more card than white and blue and black. 3 in a red for a creature human artificer at common. Sweatworks Brawler is a 3/3. It has Improvise and it has Menace. A 3/3 Menace for 4 is probably fine. You know, it's a hill giant with an upside, which is fine. Being able to potentially come down earlier is also good, although it's not going to come down that much early. You would have to have the dream curve for this to come out even a turn early. 2 turns early is probably just going to be unheard of. But still, getting a discount later in the game might be nice. I think this will be sort of a bread and butter red creature. It's not going to be a high pick, but it's always going to be playable, and you're going to be happy to have maybe even a couple of these. So I'm at a C+ on Sweatworks Brawler. I think it's solid. Our final red card of Aether Revolt is Wrangle. Wrangle is 1 in a red for a sorcery at common. Gain control of target creature with power 4 or less until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. I've already talked about how I don't really like threaten effects. You know what I don't like doing with threaten effects? Taking tiny, unimpactful creatures with them. There will, of course, be times where you take their only chump blocker and that gives you lethal, but there's going to be a lot of times where this doesn't hit anything or doesn't hit anything impactful. As I talked about with Carrie Zevs' expertise, threaten effects should be ending the game. And this will end the game sometimes, but I think a lot of the time, it's not going to do anything. So this was like a C- before my natural bias against threaten effects. Realistically, I think it's just a D. I think this has so few places that you can actually play it that I almost would argue giving it an F. Wrangle, do not like it. D. So that's going to wrap it up for the red set review for Aether Revolt. There's a lot of good cards in here. There's a lot of bomby things. That Scrapper's Champion, I think, is going to be a scourge of the format at Uncommon. Thankfully, it's at Uncommon and not Common. There's some other great stuff. Shock is back, which is fantastic. I'm going to be very excited to draft myself a free Ram or a free Jam Regent. Let me know what you think of red down in the comments below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at The Mana Leak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at twitch.tv/TheManaLeak, facebook.com/TheManaLeak. And if you want to become a patron and back the channel financially, you can go to patreon.com/TheManaLeak. There's a few reward tiers there. You can sponsor drafts. You get access to the patrons only stream where I post things like my set review notes, so you can go over those and easily refer back to them. And there's also a bonus where if you ever donate $60 over the lifetime of your entire patronage, if that takes you 60 months at $1, or if that takes you 1 month at $60, you get yourself the Mana Leak playmat, which you've maybe seen in crackback videos and things like that. I will send that out to you, so make sure that you do check that out. As always, click that thumbs up icon if you do like the content. Click subscribe if you want to see more. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the green set review.